Alright guys, so I took you off the tripod, so hopefully it's not real jumpy. But I just want to kind of run you across this and look at it. See all those pits? Every little pit matters. And you want it to be nice and smooth like what we got right here. But if you have pits all through the shaft, you need to make sure you replace these. It does cost a little bit of money, but it's so worth it in the long run. Okay, so here's another thing. Can you guys see anything in there that shouldn't be in there? There should be no red paint inside that reservoir. That red paint, it gets down inside. You see that? So whoever rebuilt this last, they rebuilt it, but they painted it with this motor off. And all that crap gets down inside there. So that's not the greatest thing to do. You want to paint it at the end once everything is all assembled. Because that's not good when you got a reservoir full of oil and paint and it's sucking that up. Let me take you back over to this and I'll show you what I'm referring to. So I don't know how good the camera's picking it up, but there's quite a bit of red paint on that filter. So definitely not something you want to do, is to paint this while it's all exposed. And in here too, you see that there's red paint there too. So you just always want to make sure you're really careful of that. So it's completely disassembled. The next thing we're going to take is we're going to flip it over and we're going to take this off, and I guarantee you that this O-ring in here is destroyed. Alright, let me go ahead and loosen this up. And it should be two 13mm bolts. Put a little bit of light on there so you guys can see. So obviously you need to replace this to put that, back in the vise, but this was really loose. Like, it wasn't even tightened down at all. So, and here's another thing too. This is, I'll bring you closer so you can see what I'm talking about. Let me grab the camera real quick. Sometimes you got to have a close-up here. So, I always wondered why. Let me sit here. I always wondered why this thing was removable. Why they didn't make it part of this base. And there's a reason for it. And this will show you right here what the reason is. Let me grab something. Let me just grab a bolt here. So look at this. You see this? That is absolutely disgusting. That's everything that's underneath. And that, if this O-ring here is bad, that's allowing all that crud, trying to get that light in there so you can see, all this crud that's coming out of here is allowing it to get inside this tank through this little hole, because there's this access hole right here. You see? And that's, you can actually see daylight through it. You see? So that connected right to the pump. And the reason that it's like that is so that you can take this piece off and clean everything out of it, but most people never clean this, and as you can see, that totally needs to be cleaned. All that stuff going through that filter screen, ending up through here. If it gets through here, ends up in here, takes the motor out, takes this, not the motor, but takes the oil pump out, and you get no oil pressure. So we're gonna go ahead and take everything and clean it all up and get it ready for reassembly. All right, so I know there's gonna be some of you that ask, what does that O-ring look like? Well, this one actually looks pretty good. So it's squished, but it's actually not in real bad of shape. So let me kind of bring it up so you can see it a little bit better. So it's actually not that bad. But here's one that I rebuilt last week that's a little bit different story. I kept it just because I knew there was going to be a reason to show you guys. This is one that's actually went bad. You can see how rotted it is because they just start to rock back and forth. You can see that. So now granted, this one's not as bad, but I will replace it because of all the crud that was in this. It's always a good idea to replace it, clean the mounting area. And I think what happened with this is I can actually see it's a little beveled right here. Looks like to me that what happened is these bolts that had kind of worked themselves loose and caused it to rock a little bit. I think that's what the issue was. more so than the gasket itself. But if you had, say, this gasket or that O-ring, quite substantially not good. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to replace that. I'm going to put a part number in the description down below for you guys as well. I'm going to spend a little time cleaning this, and then I'll take you over and show you how to remove the O-rings and how to clean out this valve manifold. These are reusable. I don't really replace them unless they're just not working. These right here are rebuildable. A lot of people will replace them, but I'm going to show you how to clean them so you don't have to replace them. And you can mechanically push on them and see if they work or not and flow, solvent through here. So you don't need to replace these either unless they're completely frozen and not working because too much crud's walked through the system. So I'm going to go ahead and get everything set up, go over the solvent tank, and we'll meet you guys over there. All right, so our parts finally showed up for this build. So I'm going to kind of walk you through them real quick and kind of show you what everything is. So right here is your electric motor. Now what this thing does is this actually drives the oil pump that's inside the reservoir, so it kind of sits in there like that. This gasket, this was all that was left of this seal. Hopefully you guys can see that. What it's supposed to look like with the new one is that's what it's supposed to look like. And then the metal piece is still connected inside here, so we're going to have to smash that out to replace that. So then it comes with, we got ourselves a new cork gasket, and then we got a new filter as well for the oil pump. Now sometimes these oil pumps will go bad. The way you test them to see if they're good is just kind of spin them, see if they feel like, they don't want to spin or they're all growling or whatever. Just kind of rock them back and forth, see how they feel. This one feels good, so we'll go ahead and reuse it. Now this this lug, this sits at the very bottom of the case. So this actually sits underneath the case. So it sits right here in the very bottom of your case. And then this is an actual reservoir. It's magnetized, so it connects all the dirt and debris and metal and everything that can be inside your pump. But as you can look, see all the scarring from the actual bolt. So we got a new lug, and it comes with the actual O-ring. It's actually inside the bag. So there's the O-ring that came off of there, but we'll get that as well. So we got a new shaft too. So this shaft right here has a lot of pits in it. They're very problematic. The best thing to do when you guys are running your plows is to keep, these things pressure washed and cleaned after every storm. So we got a new shaft. This thing was about $95 for that new shaft. We'll go ahead and put that in. We also got a new packing kit, which goes down here at the very bottom. So I'll show you guys how to replace that as well. And then we got a packing nut. Now this packing nut, it goes to the very top part of this shaft. So this nut will actually sit up there like that. We're going to do one of those as well. We don't typically have to replace the solenoids. They either work or they don't work. I can show you how to test these in a little bit. And here are your valves that go inside your manifold. I'm going to take you over to the solvent tank with a little center punch and show you how we go about cleaning that. We're going to clean this. We're going to clean the solenoid. Or this is called the manifold. It's the valve manifold. We'll clean this. We'll also clean all these holes that are in the side of this block. But they kind of come inside here. And then there's a hole here. And then there's a hole there in the bottom. So all these intertwine inside here. So we'll go through clean that. But the next step of what we're going to do, tonight we'll do some cleaning. But then tomorrow, tonight is Christmas, so everything's closed. Tomorrow I'm going to grab some paint stripper, and we're going to strip all this off, strip all the color off everything. We're going to pull this cork gasket off, clean everything up, and then go ahead and repaint it. I'm going to also tumble the bolts, put them in a glass bead so that we can get the bolts all nice and clean the valves. And so let me take you over to the solvent tank, and I'll show you how we clean these valves out with just a standard little center punch. Okay, so I'm over here at the solvent tank. I am going to turn this on, build up some pressure. And all you need to do this process is a center punch with a sharp bit on it. It doesn't have to be real sharp, but you just have to be able to push in the valve. Now, I'll try to bring it close so you can see. So you can hear it moving. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to just clean this valve out. So I'm going to just put solvent on it. Now you want to be careful that you don't bust the O-ring off. You got one here, you got one here, and one here. This white one is a plastic Teflon ring, and then you've got a rubber O-ring, and then you've got another rubber O-ring. You don't need to replace these. So what I am going to show you how to clean it. So all you're going to do is just get some fluid in there and just push this open and closed, a handful of times just to clean out any dirt and grease, grime, old fluid. This part right here is where the solenoid actually connects to. So you just want to kind of scuff that up, maybe hit a little Scotch-Brite, and then just kind of get some solvent in there. I don't recommend letting these sit in solvent because it'll make the O-ring swell, and then the O-rings like to pop off. So I just use it as you need it, and you can kind of see as you're pushing the valve in and out, if it springs back, it works just fine. And you can kind of tell, you can see it kind of coming through the holes. Same process with all of them. That's just a single valve. This one here has 3 valves. That same concept. You can see it spraying out. Like right now there's nothing. You push it in, when it sprays out,
right? You want to do the same thing with all the valves. So all these holes get cleaned out. Spend a little bit of time working on this, because if these get dirt and stuff in there, they just don't flow really well. So, but that's kind of how that works. You can kind of see it. Kind of neat. So, and this is all you really got to do. Kind of go through them, push them. This one's got a little bit different. It's got a bump on it right here. And same concept. You just want to let the fluid get in and out. You don't need to replace these. A lot of people think you need to replace them, but as long as they spring back and forth and you've got all the crud out of there, they're just fine. You don't need to replace them. And I think all you need, if you don't have a solvent tank like this, you can just use brake cleaner. It's just a little bit more complicated with brake cleaner. You've got to spray each of them into a hole, and then you've got to, you know, move the valve in and out. You can do this one with your finger because it's an outie, right? But these ones, because the valve is on the inside, you have to use something to kind of eject it. But you can hear it squeaking, right? Like a chipmunk. That's all you need to do to clean those valves. Alright, so here's the solenoids. Now these are electrical, so I don't recommend putting a lot of solvent on them, and you don't want to submerge them. But what I'll do is I'll just use the solvent to just kind of clean them up, just to make sure that they're not corroded, and that the ears are really nice and clean. And I'll even sand these a little bit, just to kind of get them nice and clean. But that's all you really need to do with the solenoids. You don't have to get really crazy with them. I find that you just want to get the grease and the grime off of them. Make sure that the journals are clean. These are about, if you replace them, I think they're about 15-20 bucks a piece if you replace them, you know, with a Western solenoid. I mean, you can do some like knockoff solenoids too. I've never really found much of a difference between a Western solenoid versus a cheap Sam solenoid or some of the knockoff brands. They all basically do the exact same thing. They either work or they don't work. But what you want to look for on these is look to see if you can see any crack marks. See if these are cracked in any way or swollen, or if you got any like really high corrosion, or the terminals are corroded, or they look like they've been getting hot. If they haven't been and they look just fine, you go ahead and reuse them. You don't need to waste the money in replacing these. Okay, so here, next step. This is called the manifold block. Now, a couple things I wanted to point out. You have, let me shut this solvent off. You have 3 O-rings. Now, I have spare O-rings, but you want to be careful because I've found that they tend to fall off and then they end up in the solvent tank and you can't find them. So there's one big one here and then there's 2 smaller ones here. These are both the same size. This one's obviously a little bit bigger. I will go ahead and remove all 3 of these before I start cleaning this. And then I'm also going to strip all this paint off. And I'll do that probably on tomorrow's video. But I just need to get this cleaned out. You don't need to worry about adjusting any of these. This right here is your quill. You can adjust this once you get it all put back together. That kind of decides how fast the plow raises and lowers. This is something that you'll adjust, but pretty much anything else on here, like these ones over here, you don't really need to adjust them. I've never found that I needed to. But I'm going to remove these O-rings, and then I'm going to clean these journals out, and I'm going to show you how they work internally. It's just one big valve block is all it is. Let's it go in and come out of one of these holes. Let me take over the bench, and I'm going to remove these O-rings. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pop these out just real quick. I have extra ones, but just a good habit to get into to replace these. But you don't want to lose them because then you don't know what size they are. So back to there's 2 of them that are exactly the same, and then that one's a little bigger, and it's self-explanatory. One goes here, one goes here, one goes here. This hole right here is just some sort of a deflector bolt that you don't need, and these right here, you don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going to set these aside, take it back over to the solvent tank, and I'll let it soak for a little bit. Okay, so what you can do here on this part is it's probably just a good idea to let this soak for just a little bit. Just watching it, I'm seeing red paint just kind of flowing out of it, because whoever had this before I did decided to paint it, which is not a bad idea to paint them, but it's aluminum, it's not going to rust, so it's not that big of a deal. It's not that crucial. But you can see that, hopefully you can see it from that angle, by putting solvent in this hole right here, it's rushing out here, so you know it's flowing through there, right? So that's that journal. And then you put this one here, it comes out the same hole. Because these 2 right here are your left and your right, and they kind of share that journal. Like one's a relief if you hit something real hard, like a car or curb or rock or a big sheet of ice. It allows the fluid to flow back and forth. And then this one over here, this one is your up. So, and I just let it kind of sit for a little bit and just let it run through there, clean it all out. And then you also have your journals right here that allow the fluid to flow out, and you can kind of see it. And you can just let it sit like this for 10 or 15 minutes if you want to, as long as you take an O-rings off. And back over to this one. And it'll start coming out the top one. Right? So as it's doing that, I'll kind of come in here and use my little brush, kind of brush it out. Just a good idea to just spend a little bit of time in here cleaning these out. The cleaner you make it, obviously, the less you're going to have issues with it binding up down the road. So I'll just kind of fast forward to this clip for a little bit. as I kind of go through and clean everything off. And you can also, you know, put the solvent in that hole there too. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to use brake cleaner because it's got a little bit more force. Do the same thing with the brake cleaner. Just go through and clean that whole block. Now, when I get done painting and stripping this, getting this all prepped, I'll replace these because these like to get, you know, corroded and stuff. So I will replace these pieces here and just kind of let this soak for a little bit. See how it's coming out nice and clean over here? That's really what we're trying to get. Make sure all the dirt crap's out of there. Okay, so here's the last thing we're going to be cleaning out. Now, I'm also going to be sandblasting all of this, so I'll have to go through this process again just to make sure everything's out of there because we have paint on the inside of the previous owner. So go ahead and turn this on and just kind of wash it out to get all the junk crud out of there. Now, this goes straight down through the bottom into that very bottom lug. So you guys get the idea. I'm just going to kind of fast forward a little bit through this, kind of show the process of cleaning it. You get the picture. Just want to get all the dirt and grime out of there. Get it as clean as you can so it goes together with no debris and grime and crap in there. So